So they put white tape on the stage and it says, stop, stop, stop. Because I'll be out of camera range if I move over here. So I'm normally a good team player, but when I'm asked to not go someplace, I usually go there. Sorry, camera guys. You're probably smart not to put these up. Anyway, welcome to the photo workshop. How are you? How's the event so far? Are we putting on a good enough event for you? Yes. That's good. I'd ask you if you have any complaints, but I don't want to hear it. So my name is Griff. What's yours? Good, I got them all. Let's take a big selfie and I'll put it on the wall later. So what we're here to talk about seriously is photos. And I'm assuming that those of you who've come in want to make your photos better. How many of you want to make your photos better? How many of you admit that you're terrible at taking photos? Can you keep your hands up and look around? You're not alone. Everyone's photos are terrible. No, they're pretty good. I had some guy come up to me in the photo labs area in the expo hall and says, oh, I don't think you're going to like my pictures. And he takes out his listings. These are beautiful pictures. I'm saying, what am I supposed to critique? Why don't you get up here and teach the class? He didn't want to do it. So the thing about the process that I found, and I'm reminded of this in talking with people during the break, was that it's learning to become a good photographer and take good pictures. It's not a destination. It's an ongoing journey. So those of us who've been doing this for a long time, the reason why we keep doing it is we're never satisfied. I take a few photos of listings and I think I could have done that better. I need to experiment. I need to change some things up. I want to see if I can get this to look like this as opposed to this. And that's part of the fun. Of course, when you're selling on eBay, or if you're selling for a living, you don't always have enough time for the experimentation part. But I'm going to ask you that as a first task is to remember, when you get home and you've read your notes and you take screenshots of the screen, is to remember to set aside some time to jump into what you have already for a camera, for a smartphone, for your equipment, and start experimenting with it and see if just changing things up can help you get better photos. I find people that are afraid of their cameras. So I'll say, have you checked the camera settings and changed the exposure? And they go, what? You want me to do that? Yeah, try it. But what if I break something? That's the cool thing. You're not going to break anything. It's not like film days where you could screw up a camera. You can't really break anything, and it's not going to cost you anything to change things up. So my first word of advice before we even start on the presentation is don't be afraid to experiment. Because that's how most of us who do this learn the best ways of doing it. We could read books and stuff and take advice from people like me on a stage, but it's ultimately up to you to experiment and find the setup that works best for you. If we all lived in the same type of house, had the same lighting, had the same camera, and the same stuff for sale, this would be an easy workshop. I could do it in 5 minutes. I could list off the things and say, go do this, thanks, go have lunch. But that's not how we operate. Every one of us is different, and that's what makes eBay such a fun marketplace. So we're going to talk about the options you have for taking the photo. In the old days, there were a lot of options. When I started at eBay, there were still people that were using their film cameras to take pictures of their objects and then bringing them to 24-hour photo, waiting for the prints, and then they'd bring them home and they'd scan them, and then they'd upload them. But you couldn't upload them to eBay because there was no such service. You had to upload them to an FTP server and then know how to reference them in the description by putting in the image tag for HTML and the photo and perhaps the dimensions as image attribute tabs. Have I lost you yet? Good. Because when people tell me, I miss the old days of eBay, I think, no, you don't. You think you do, but you don't. Because now it's a lot easier. Now you can focus on the things that really matter. You don't have to know anything about the technology beyond just a few simple points. And what you can focus in on is becoming an artist, becoming creative. And the first step to doing this is trusting your eye and trusting your intuition and not being afraid to experiment. So we'll talk about camera options. We'll talk about the importance of having a dedicated studio space. I spoke to a woman after this first workshop this morning who described to me a home where it's impossible for her to set up anything for a photo and a studio. And I kept asking her, well, explain a little more. And after about 10 minutes, I realized that I should be on the phone calling the producers of Hoarders because I found a really good subject for the show. We'll talk about studio lighting. And if you visited the photo lab yet, we have the great crew here took my recommendations about what to set up, and they went out and bought some equipment. And it's really good stuff, and it's a great example of some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about. So when you have time, if you haven't been in the expo hall in that area, go behind where they're taking headshots, and there are 3 big displays that are good, better, and best. And that's all what I'm talking about here. And you can actually view the equipment, and you can scan the QR codes to get search results where you can find the stuff to buy on. Thank you. Where do we not shop? I didn't hear it. Every camera or every smartphone has a series of settings, and it's going to be your job after this to know what they do. Every single one of them. We're not going to go through every single one, but I want you to experiment at home so that you know everything that's in that camera, what it's supposed to do, and then we're going to show you how to set up and take the shot. So let's get started. And we'll do Q&A after this. And I run through this pretty quickly now, so I leave a lot of room for Q&A. Now, your camera options are these. And it doesn't matter which one you use. If you're comfortable using your old point-and-shoot camera, please continue doing so. You may want to experiment with your smartphone and see if you like it better. You won't know until you try it. If you're using an expensive DSLR and it works for you, mazel tov, keep on using it. But the smartphones and the tablets that are being made today by Apple and Samsung and a host of other companies for Android have created cameras that are as good, if not better, than point and shoot. So a lot of us can get away with just using our iPhone or our Android phone and take really good photos. There's a guy who I'm friends with on Facebook, I was introduced, who is the presidential photographer for Gerald Ford. And he posts on Facebook, he's constantly traveling. His name is David Kennerly. Does anyone here know David? So great photographer and a wonderful guy. And he posts photos of his travels. And for the longest time, I thought, well, he must be carting this big camera around with him in like airplanes and places he goes. So I asked him, I said, what do you use? He said, I use my iPhone. I said, these are like archival, beautiful photo studio prints. He said, no, I just use my iPhone. I don't do anything. It's his eye. It's what he knows as composing the shot and setting the iPhone to take the best picture under the light. And you could do this too, and all you have to worry about are products, which don't tend to move, right? So it's not like you're taking pictures of babies or dogs. And tend to be, there's a purpose. It's not just for art, but you're going to sell it. So you want to make the best representation possible. So your smartphone will take those good pictures. Now, I use a Lumix, a Panasonic Lumix. If anyone wants to see it, I carry it around with me. It's a great camera for a lot of purposes, but whatever works for you, that's what I recommend. So after you know what you're going to use to take the pictures, you have to set up a studio space. And this is the part I think that's a challenge for most of us. We don't all live in McMansions or have a lot of extra space. Even those of us who are pretty organized usually don't put at the top of the mind, I need a studio. So what am I going to do? And I'm going to find a dedicated space in I only got like 1,400 square feet. Or someone said to me, I have 2,800 square feet. Where am I going to find a studio? Again, what? 2,800 square feet. Well, I've got, this here and that. We got to get rid of stuff. You got to sell it. She was talking about all her death piles. Do you know about death piles? That's inventory that you bought that you haven't listed yet. And who knows if you ever will. I have a garage full of death piles. Here's the consideration for your studio space, and these are pretty basic. It should be big enough so that you can shoot the largest type of inventory that you can. So if your inventory is jewelry, boy, are you in luck, because you don't need a space bigger than this. You can put this on your desktop. Over on the Photo Lab, we have one of the examples of the self-contained light cubes that I recommend, and some of these are ideal for jewelry. And you don't need a lot of space. So if you're a jewelry seller or knickknacks or Hummels, ugh. Who knows my thing about Hummels? Raise your hand. Yeah, I have a real thing for Hummels. And that's why I usually carry a hammer around with me. I hate them. But every time I smash one, you should be happy if you're selling it, because I've just made the market more rare and your prices are going to go up. Any space in your domicile or office can work as long as you can do the following. It's big enough, right? But also you need to be able to block out all the light. Now, if it's a room with no windows, that's great. But if it isn't, you just need to put up blackout curtains on the window. And you need to be able to shut off any of the artificial light that's already used to illuminate the room. So that's not too hard to do. What you're trying to get is a dark room. But Griff, I'm not developing film. I know, but in a minute, this is going to be really obvious why this is important. And it should be a dedicated space so that you're not wasting valuable time setting it up and tearing it down, setting it up and tearing it down. I know too many of you who are doing this right now, on the kitchen table, in the bathroom, by the shower, in the bedroom, while your husband's trying to sleep, and he's annoyed that you're trying to sell all these list photos. Is this sound familiar? Right. So it has to be all these three things. And if you can't do this, this is a great time to sell your house. The market's really hot, and search for a place where you can find a dark. It's your business. I mean, I'm partially joking, but really, you should take this seriously, right? Here's some of the examples that people use. Now, the first one with the green walls is a corner in my dining room in my old Victorian house in San Jose. And for a long time, this is how I shot images. In the corner of the house that gets a lot of natural light, and on a good day, the colors would be, I'd get a good rendition. I used an old Chinese table that I bought at a sale, and that's an old Chinese table. That's a 17th century table, by the way. Any collectors? Anyone interested? I'll sell it to you. And I got like a long piece of white paper that I taped to the wall, and my little camera's on my tripod, and I'm taking a photograph of a camera I sold on eBay. The second one is an example of one of these little light cubes that are self-contained. For those of you who sell small things and don't have a space for a dedicated studio space, these are superb. Now, there's different versions and different sizes of these, but the one thing they all share in common is their light source is internal. It's not light that's being shown from the outside of the box through diffused fabric to light the item. You'll see these on sale for eBay for $20, $35. They seem like a good deal. They're garbage. Do not buy one. How many of you bought one already? Please raise your hand so we can make fun of you. Thank you. Look around. Yeah, you want to get rid of that. You may find some suckers on eBay, so resell it. You want something that's Sorry? What? It's true. Now, come on. How many of you have done you're not going to admit you haven't done this? This thing is terrible. I'm going to sell it to someone on eBay. Yeah, I go to Nordstrom's and I buy some cologne that I think I'm going to light. I bring it home and it smells like a French whorehouse. I'm putting it on eBay. And I get big feedback. This is great. It smells so clean and wonderful. You got no nose. So I have a version of this. I have 3 of that I really like, and there's a picture of it in the presentation you'll see in a moment. It's 2 feet cube, and it's big enough for shoes, for handbags, for small collectibles, boxes of stuff. I use it now more and more because I don't have to worry about my studio space. The light inside is really bright and really controlled. This one doesn't have this feature, but the bigger one, there's a big light panel on the top with LEDs that are super, super bright. I mean, when you look at it, it's like looking at the eclipse. It'll blind you. But the box itself is covered in the inside with textured foil, so it takes that powerful illumination and then bounces it all around the inside of the box. So you get very few shadows, really even light, great pictures. How many of you sell just items that'll fit in a box like that? Good. You can leave if you want to go get ice cream or something, because you don't need to know anything else I'm going to tell you. But for those of you who want to learn more, we'll stick around. And then the last one's probably the best situation, because it's all purpose, and it's what a professional would do. Using their dedicated, closed-off studio space, lighting it only with these softbox lights. And this particular photo, I stole it from Google. This is it's nice. It's a picture of a thing on a table. It's not using a backdrop, but it gives you an idea of what that studio can look like. You're going to need a background. And I talked to someone today who was convinced that putting nice, fancy backgrounds with flowers and fabric and cedar fences was what their buyers wanted. And I had to try to find a way to break it to him that no, your buyers are buying the object, and putting it in front of an old cedar fence, unless you're selling the cedar fence, makes no sense. And most importantly, it's highly unlikely that Google Shopping will include it in the feed that we send to them once a day, because they have a rather strict and mysterious, mostly, algorithm to determine which items are going to appear and which items aren't going to appear in Google Shopping. He said to me, why should I care about Google Shopping? I list on eBay. Buyers today tend to start their shopping journey outside of eBay, and they use Google Shopping as their first initial step in their purchasing journey. So if your item isn't showing up on Google Shopping, you are losing customers. So you don't want to do anything with your photographs that's blocking it from the feed. Now, I recommend white. White's all-purpose. White's what most retailers and marketers will use for product. It's the best kind of background to set off any of your products or items, unless they are white themselves. Then it gets a little tricky, and maybe gray or black is a good choice. Now, I do use black occasionally for white shirts, for example, or for white pottery vases, or any of the other stuff that's very pale. The black that I recommend, and I recommend this both, it says paper and muslin and vinyl, but I really recommend paper. And you can buy rolls of background paper on eBay for a very good, affordable price in various widths, anywhere from 3 or 4 feet up to 10 feet wide. It comes on a big roll, you put it up on the stand, you pull it down, you drape it over your stand and your table, you get a seamless background, what's called a cyc in theater, or cyclorama. So there's no seam, you don't see any real variation, and your object can look like it's floating against the white background. I'll use the black paper that is flocked like velvet for like a white shirt, because that black absorbs all the light that hits it, so you really get jet black. And then occasionally some people use gray. I stopped using gray. I found I can get away with black or white. But those are the 3 recommendations. What you want to avoid are color. But I like green. It's my favorite color, so all my backgrounds are green. Go check Google Shopping and tell me if your listings are showing up. Chances are they aren't. And green? Really? Which retailer puts their products on green? Ugh. Ugh. Studio lighting. Now, there's many options you can use, but I'm just going to recommend one. And this is for not the softbox, but for just the best setup. Softboxes are these fixtures you've seen here on the right. We have a set of them on the floor. They come in various quality ratings and prices. Even the inexpensive ones will work well. And when I say inexpensive, you can find, there are a lot of competitors selling these in the market, so the prices have come down. You're looking for a kit of 3, a complete kit that has the boxes, those square things with the translucent film, the stands, and every box has a fixture that will accept 4 bulbs minimum and no less. Do not buy the one with the 1 bulb fixture. You're not going to get enough illumination out of that. The bulbs that come with the kit are perfect. They'll be rated at about 5,500 Kelvin. That's the light temperature. We'll get into that in more detail in a moment. And they're equal in equivalent to incandescent wattage of anywhere from 200 to 400. Now, the wattage on the bulb will be a lot less, but incandescent bulbs consume less energy. So they'll say wattage for that brightness is always going to be less. It's nice. You're using less electricity, and it's not as hot. So if you're working in a closed environment with incandescent lighting, that can become like an oven. And this tends to prevent that because these bulbs operate at a much cooler temperature. And you can find them on eBay. Now, some of you, because we're so far away, it's hard to scan that QR code unless you zoom in and you're very steady. And if you have an iPhone, all you need to do is zoom in on that QR code and take a photo of it, and then a pop-up box will say you want to go see this on eBay, and this will take you to a search results for current live listings that match these features on eBay. If it's not working for you, you can go to the Photo Lab and do it there. With an Android phone, you'll have to use a scanner app in order for this to happen. It's a little bit of an inconvenience. Here's the light box I use. It comes under various names because it's made generically in China, and many people then brand it themselves. So it's hard to use a keyword where they're all going to come up. But this one is the biggest that I've seen made so far, and it's a 2-foot cube. All of the internal illumination is internal, but the thing on the top. And sometimes they go by the name of Studio Pro. There's a company called Sonauto that sells some of these. This I highly recommend. Everyone should have one of these in their inventory. It's a lifesaver for me. I have one at work, on my desk, at eBay. eBay employees are encouraged to sell on eBay and buy. So part of the reason why I love my job is half my day I'm listing and buying on eBay. So I answer a few emails, listen to your complaints, your questions, go, here's the, and then I go list stuff. Or I go to the mailroom and I pick up all my purchases, or I drop my sales off, and I get a paycheck. Don't you wish you were me? No, I'm not. I don't hire people anymore. You don't have to apply. So this is what light temperature is. So all light in the visible spectrum has what's called a temperature, and it's rated on a scale called Kelvin. You may, if you've taken physics, know about Kelvin, because absolute zero is 0 degrees Kelvin, and that's where all atomic activity ceases. We're not sure it actually exists anywhere in the universe, but that's the low end of the vibration scale. When you're up at the light wave end of the scale in the visible length, above infrared and below ultraviolet, this is the light you can see. And it all is rated at a temperature, and the lower the number, the warmer the tone. So candlelight is roughly 1500 to 2000 Kelvin, and daylight, if you're looking up in the middle of the day, where the sun is not directly overhead, so it's not, you're not looking at it, and you're looking at that really deep, bright blue sky, that's about 8,000 degrees Kelvin. It's very, very blue, very, very white, a cool tone. We're looking at something in between. Roughly daylight as it reflects off of items in the middle of the day, it's 55 to 6,000 K. These bulbs from China are all rated about 5,500 K. Here's the tip. Here's the important bit of information. All the light in your environment for taking a product photo has to be the same temperature. And this is why we want to block the windows and shut off the incandescent lights in the ceiling. Because if they're rated at a lower rating, or the sunlight coming in is a different rating, and you're using 5,500 K bulbs, the sensor in your digital camera, which is calibrated to read light temperature, and then if there's too many different sources, come up with an average, looks at all the light temperature that's coming in and goes, average. And the average sometimes means that your blue shirt looks a little teal, or your red shirt has an orange cast that shouldn't have had, or your green item is looking a little yellow as opposed to green. Has this happened to you? That's the reason why. Because unlike film, which has an absolute value when light is exposed to it, the digital sensors in digital cameras and smartphones are meant to calibrate what the color cast of the item is based on the temperature of the light. And if you're not using consistent light, then you're risking color rendition that's not accurate. And what happens when you have inaccurate color rendition? Not as described. You said it was teal, it is blue. I'm giving you negative feedback. I'm taking away your top rated status. Say goodbye to your 10%. Your life is going to really suck from this point on. And all because you didn't listen to my advice. So you can't blame me. Now, if you want to take a photo of this, if you're taking notes, this is probably a good slide, because this is kind of like the lighting summary of the things we've talked about. The only thing missing here is I didn't talk about flash. And when they compiled the slide, they thought to add it in here. How many of you use your camera's flash when you're taking a photo for product? I'm not going to pick on you, I promise. Anyone? Ha ha! I couldn't resist. No, you should never use the camera flash. We'll show you in a minute why. Now we talk about what your camera or smartphone can do, and that's understanding its settings. And if you haven't explored them, I really encourage you to do so. One of the cool things about, I'm not an iPhone expert, but I have a Samsung Android phone, is it's different than an iPhone. It's more complicated. There's more to learn. But I'm constantly learning new things to do with my phone that I didn't know, and I've owned it for 4 years. So this morning, I figured out, I never knew this, I can do split screen on my Android. You can't do that on an iPhone. I can take an app and I can make it on the top of the screen. I can open up another app, and there's a button you click on the frame of the window, and I have 2 screens, and I can see this screen. So if I need to read information from one, that's brilliant. I didn't know this. I learned it this morning while I was in bed in the hotel upstairs before I got up and took a shower. And I did. There's many other settings in your camera or your smartphone. These are the 5 that are top of the list. The flash, just so I can remind you to shut it off. The camera mode, this is in most cameras and cell phones as well. The picture size, the size of the resolution of the image you're taking. Whether or not you need the feature, it's called macro. And then finally, white balance, which reflects back on what we were talking about with light temperature. So if you have a flash in your camera or your phone, make sure it's turned off. But it gives me extra light, Griff. Yeah, it gives you light that does this. So on these are all listings I found on eBay. Look at that button, the top button of that shirt. Do you see anything else? I don't. It's like staring into the sun. And the second one, So the first one, the colors are washed out and you've got that hot spot, not a professional photo. It does not reflect well on that seller. The second one is interesting because I've seen this effect happen at all. It's unintentional. The seller's not trying to do this, but the seller's trying to scare the shit out of you with that mug. Because that's a harmless little mug and now it looks like something sinister. Because it's cast that ugly shadow. It's like, I'm a coffee mug, and now, I'm a coffee mug. Guess who forgot to shut their phone off? Oh, it's a robocall. Hang up. Got an app on Android that recognizes robocalls and says, just hang up. Yeah, you got to get that. And the third one is obvious. You can't see half of that watch face. Again, this is all because of flash. You never want to use camera. Flash is great for, for other situations. You got your phone, you got your camera, you're out walking the strip, you decide you and your friends you're going to get drunk and dive naked into the Bellagio pool and you want a record of it so you can post it on Facebook for the police to find. Make sure you use your flash so they catch every detail of your anatomy and charge you with the correct crime. But for product photographs, please don't. I love this shot. I didn't put this together. I had the basic information and photos in this wonderful company that does this they cleaned it up and made it look really nice. This is a beautiful shot. So this is an example of a camera with a mode dial. In your smartphone, it's usually going to be a set of selections you can scroll and check. Now, if I go through that button, you can see there's things called scene, and there's like these little icons, and there's a multi-burst. The best one for experimenting as you start off is the intelligent auto mode because it gauges things like light and exposure and it'll give you the maximum quality photo based on your current setup without you having to go in and change the shutter speed or the aperture opening and the ISO and a whole bunch of other stuff you don't want to worry about. So always start off using one of the IA setting or intelligent auto. And then the next important thing is the picture size itself. And this is still an issue. I don't know why. I don't know why this is such an issue with some people. I don't want to make my pictures too big. If they're too big, well, I'm wasting pixels. And, pixels cost a lot of money. And there's only so many pixel trees in the world. And, we got to survive. And what the hell are you talking about? It's not film. Pixels don't cost anything. So people still seem to be rather miserly sometimes. And those are when you go to a listing, how many of you shop on eBay? I'm sure you all do. So you find a picture and you go to, zoom it, and there's no zoom. You're hovering over it. That's because the picture is too small. We can't zoom it. We don't have an original photo to actually zoom into. So if you want your buyer to be able to take advantage of that, then your picture needs to be at least, I say, it's a little more than eBay's recommendation, 1600 by 1200, approximately, the two axes. That can vary if it's a square picture or if it's a longer picture. But that's a good starting point. And that way you'll still get the zoom and you should get a clear picture if you're cropping in camera and not cropping afterwards. But I set my camera high resolution, so I'll set it at something like 2 to 3000 or 1500 to 2000, depending what the camera, the device can support. You can set it to the highest. Maybe it becomes an issue that you don't have enough storage on your card or your phone to do that. So finding a balance there with storage in mind might be a smart move to make. But these big pictures, unlike if you were selling on eBay 15, 20 years ago, well, they wouldn't have pictures 20 years ago, say 15, we limited the size of photos. Because we were miserly with our server space, and we didn't want huge photo files clogging it up. Can you imagine what stupid idiots we were? It's all about images. There should always be the biggest images possible. Now, if you're not sure how to do this, explore your camera settings until you find something that says resolution or size, and it'll give you the options for selecting presets. And select the one that you can work with that's big enough for the big photos and not so big it's taking up too much of your storage. And then macro is a specialized feature that is available on cameras. Most cell phones have this built in. So for most cell phones, you don't necessarily need to look for and find a macro feature. What the macro feature does is it allows the sensor and the lens to work together you can get your camera like an inch away from the surface of an item and take a sharp picture. Now, you say you sell silver, and it's hallmarked, and you want to show the hallmark really close up. If you're using a camera and you don't have it set for macro, every time you try to get close, it's going to blur because the lens can't focus at that length. It needs the macro feature turned on. So if you need to do that on your camera, look for the little tulip. And that's the international icon that indicates macro. Now, in the old days of film, macro was the term that was used for specialized lenses that could do this. But we're not using film, we're not using interchangeable lenses. This is all a camera sensor action now. This is what happens, for example. There's a rare vintage. How many people know there's one, I hate Hummels and I hate the word vintage. If you listen to the show, you know why. There's a Bic lighter, no macro, try to take a close-up, it's all blurred. Just use the same camera and make sure you click the macro feature so it's on. Now you can get right in and take a sharp picture of the item itself. And finally, white balance. Now that's a shirt from my inventory from a few years ago. Those are actual photographs I took, and I took them intentionally in a way that would show what can happen when your white balance is all off. The first one is way too warm, and the second one is way too cool. So if you're using 5500K, for example, it could be 6000K, as long as it's all 6000K. It could be 4500K, as long as it's all 4500K. The 5500 is kind of a standard, because most of the bulbs that are coming over with these kits from China have been rated 5500K. So the Chinese are telling us which bulb temperature we're going to use. Okay, good. If it makes you feel good, go ahead. So this is what we got it, and most cameras will have the following white balance settings on the bottom. Average white balance, not average, auto white balance. I'm thinking of average white band every time I see that. Who remembers average white band? Cut the cake, pick up the pieces. You've got a daylight setting for shooting in daylight, a shade, a cloudy, tungsten, fluorescent, flash, custom, and color temperature. If you're, I love the color temperature if that's available. That's not on most phones. It is on my Android phone and on my Lumix camera. It lets me actually set the sensor to the exact temperature of the bulbs. If you don't have that, try to use the auto white balance or experiment with the different presets and see if they give you the right color rendition. So the one preset may render a red shirt exactly the color red that it is. But another preset, that same preset may not do it for blue. So you're going to want to play around. That's, again, being open to experimentation and trying all the settings until you get the right one. This is actually what the shirt color is. Now, let's do a comparison. So there's those two. This is white balance set, 5500K, only 5500 bulbs. That's exactly what the shirt looked like. The buyer left positive feedback. Beautiful shirt, as described. Sorry? With the nice green background. I didn't put that on there. No. Let me explain. So, damn you. The first class didn't pick up on this. The compilers of the presentation decided these were the template colors for the presentation, and we couldn't have just white. We have to make it pretty. I'm not going to argue with them. But no, it should be on a white background, you're right. But here, who said that, by the way? To be commended you are, because you're using your eye, and you pick that out, and the rest of you are just wimps. You can find the white balance setting on your camera. Another robocall? Jeez, give up. In the phone, this is a Samsung phone, there, and the photo settings, there is a white balance feature on all of those phones. There is that on the iPhone, I believe, still has white balance presets at the very least. And this is my Canon DSLR, which has a white balance preset, and then you'll see the last one is K, where I can actually go in and set the temperature at exactly what the bulbs are. And if you're in doubt about where to find these, especially with a camera, make sure you've read the manual, RTM, one of my favorite acronyms. I know most of the women in here will read the manual, most of the men won't. Well, don't you think we should stop, hun, and ask directions? I know how to get there. No, you don't. And then there's taking the shot. You're going to have a tripod. How many of you have a tripod now? Hooray! How many of you use it? Boo. A lot of you don't use it. So tripod, I know we're working fast, right? We got a lot of things to photograph, a lot of things to list, handheld the camera, a lot easier. If it works, great. But take a closer look at your photos. Some of them might not be perfectly sharp, even though you think you're holding the camera steady. And that's because we're living organisms. And by that I mean we breathe and our hearts beat. So you think you're holding the camera straight? Every time you breathe, watch my hands. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit. Every time my heart beats, my pulse is making this happen. I'm exaggerating, but it's there, and it's just enough to move the camera, and it might be just enough if the shutter hits at the same time, you're going to get a blurry picture. But the problem is it's not going to be obviously blurry. It's going to look sharp still in the viewfinder, and you're going to get past it. And it's not until you list the item up on eBay and then you go to look at the listing, if you do, that you may notice, wait, that photo's not as sharp as the others. And I want these to be professional because I'm a perfectionist. Putting it on a tripod is the best way to guarantee this. So you can buy tripods on eBay, and they're pretty inexpensive. I tend to go to these, I went to thrift stores for a long time, and I'd buy every tripod I saw for $3 until I realized, wait a minute, they're missing the little plate on the top. But they're not useless, because you can buy the plates on eBay. They make universal plates. You can buy them for a few bucks, and now you got a tripod. I have about 20 of these. Anyone need one? I'm serious. I'll mail it to you. Just email me. Raffle. Like I have time for that. So here's some various examples. It doesn't matter what they are as long as they got 3 legs and they're somewhat stable and they have their little plate. If you have the budget and you're so inclined, you can buy like a Manfrotto. That's a brand name which is considered one of the highest quality camera equipments when it comes to tripods and stands, but be prepared to pay several $100s. You can get away with a workable tripod brand new on eBay for about 25 bucks or even a little less. You need to start framing in camera if you're not doing this. One of my goals here is to get you so that you're not relying on post-photo editing for things like changing the exposure, fixing the color, cropping the image. This is work. And if you rely on this as work, these are extra steps that you could have spent sourcing product, listing it on eBay, collecting payments, answering questions, which are more important for your business. So I want you to, their goal is to be, if you're doing it now, is to eliminate those post-photography shoot steps that you take with software. And if you do all the things I'm recommending, you'll find that the vast majority of your images won't need any editing after you've taken them. And framing in camera is the big one. So this eliminates cropping. And when I say framing in camera, I mean adjusting with the zoom or the camera position back and forth until you get the image where the product is taking up as much of the viewfinder as possible so that you don't have to crop it. And a lot of sellers, what they'll do is they don't use their eye, and they'll move way back, and they'll take a picture where the object is taking up this much of a screen that's this big, and later they'll crop it, and they'll say, well, how it works. But the problem is you took a resolution of 16 by 1200, and now you've reduced it to an image that may be like 200 by 400, and it's a worthless image. So by framing in the camera beforehand, you avoid that possibility, and you don't have to do the step afterwards. And it's really easy. You'll find how once you've done this, if you haven't done it, you say, I should have been doing this years ago. And the last thing before we take Q&A is I want to talk about light positionings. Now, I think the graphic may be a little confusing for people. This is an overhead elevation of what your studio lighting system should look like. Those are soft boxes looked at from the top. They're on stands. You place numbers 1 and 2 at an angle on either side of the item so it illuminates the side and part of the front in a wash. And then you use a third one of the kit, hopefully on a boom, so that it's overhead, shining down on the same angle of the top and the front, but it's high enough so it's not in the camera view. And the set that we have out on the floor shows that boom mechanism with the little weight so that you can position it so it's not in front of the camera, but you're getting overhead light of the same illumination and temperature on the top and the front of the item. Those 3 lights will give you adequate illumination. Your item should be perfect in the photo. But the one thing those things don't usually solve is the background issues. And here's the background issue. My white background never looks white. It looks dull gray. It's dingy. Dingy. Someone's at my front door. Damn, I should have shut the phone off. Let's see who it is. No, I don't want them. Let me turn this off. Sorry, I didn't mean, that was unprofessional. There, okay. So if you want to get your background more white, there's a few things you can do in camera. You can try increasing your camera exposure. Your cell phone or your camera, well, one of the settings is exposure. It's not as important. It's usually easy to find. You can bump it up a few notches and see if that gives you a white background without washing out the item. That's one thing. You can do the laborious step that people seem to do, which is afterwards process it through an app that strips out the white background and puts in a whiter background, a cleaner, whiter, bleacher background that, your laundry looks perfect. It's a lot of work. Or you can light the background with extra light boxes. So you invest in 2 or 3 if you want, but 2 will do it. Light boxes that you position on stands behind the item, off to the side, so it's not in the camera view, but it's only illuminating the background. And in almost every case where we've done this for someone, the white background becomes really white. And the item itself is still illuminated at the proper illumination and doesn't look bleached out. Did I come up with this? No, I discovered this in a photography studio where a professional product photographer was explaining on YouTube or something, this is how he gets a white background. And I would say, oh, take that note. And that's how you do it. One more slide. And that's the black background. So sometimes if you're using black paper as opposed to that black flock stuff, because the flock stuff's not easy to find, by the way. It used to be available on eBay. It isn't anymore. You can buy it at like B&H Photo. You know what that means, right? There's a niche market. Who's going to take it? You can start finding the wholesaler in China that makes this black paper, and you can start selling on eBay, because there's no competitors right now. And Griff's telling everyone to buy it, so I'm your marketer. This could work out well for you. You want to, if your black background is not absolutely black, that means that some of your light from your softboxes is illuminating it and giving enough cast so it's appearing, maybe shine a little bit of light back, look a little gray, look a little less flat black. Just move your entire lighting and table away from the background as far as you can until the lights are no longer illuminating the background, the backdrop material, just the item. And this will give you a blacker background. Has this been a revelation yet? How many people how many here in the room have learned something? Oh, good, I feel I've done my job, because it's now time for me to say thank you and to take Q&A. So there's a microphone up here. We'll take questions for about, we ended a slight bit early, so we take questions for about 15, 20 minutes. If you have a question, please come up and say it into the mic so we can all hear it. Here's our first questioner. Oh no, she's leaving.
Hi.
A little part of me is dying. No, I'm okay. Yes.
I have a mannequin problem.
What's the mannequin problem?
She's got shadows all over the place.
Yeah.
And I've risen her. I've elevated her. I've pulled her away from the wall.
Yeah.
I've moved my lights this way and that, and I still get
Where's
bad
the shadow
shadows.
showing up?
Well, I think one of the things that I learned today is I need to black out the room. It doesn't have any windows in it, but it does have a slider. So I'm going to black out that light.
Yeah.
I'm going to readjust my situation.
Yeah, because if besides light temperature, if you're trying to adjust for illumination and shadow, you're not in control, because there's light streaming in that you have no control over. You haven't blacked it out. So that is the first step.
So that's step one. But like as you're sitting there right now, there's a shadow around you.
Yeah, there's a light.
That's what I'm getting.
Yeah.
So
you need, are you positioning your lights off to the side?
Yes.
And you're still getting that?
Yes.
You need more light, or you need brighter light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
By the way, before we stop, because I didn't do this until the end of the first class, get your pens out. My email address is griff@ebay.com. I think I'm one of the only employees of this company that does this. Everyone else is afraid of you for some reason. So Wendy Jones did? Yeah, she has people answer her email. I don't. Is this being taped? Hi, Wendy. I love you. They'll cut this out because I'll lose my job otherwise. Yeah, my email address is griff@ebay.com, and I answer my own email, and I love to help with photo questions. But if you have any eBay questions, feel free to email me. Now, you're going to get a long auto response. Please don't be offended. There's a lot of information in that auto response, and you might want to read through it. It's a little bit pedantic, it's a little bit brusque, but that's how I am. But, sorry?
Sorry, your email address, is it the @ sign?
Yes. No, it's @ sign. It's griff@ebay.com. GRI, F as in Frank, @ sign, ebay.com. It's a dot, and then COM. Yeah, go ahead, laugh. There's a test. If you have a question about eBay, feel free to answer. If you have a question about anything, so I like to think I'm a know-it-all, and I also like to help. So if you're having marital disputes or problem with your kids, let me know. I'm happy to help. All right, we're at Q&A. Yes, your question.
Okay, what I photograph is flatware. Okay, so basically it's all silver with a little black highlight in it. I can't get a white background for anything. I am going to try more lighting on it. I've got 2 overhanging lights right now. Left
What kind
and
of
right.
lights? What kind of lights are they?
They're the shadow box lights.
Yeah.
I bought them maybe 7 years ago. They have the 4 lights inside, the silver and then the white over the top of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I shoot into a white box.
Okay.
Okay, my problem is they really show up beautiful with a blue background.
Okay.
And everyone can see it and it's very defined. White makes it all look washed out, and it seems like it's just so much work for me to get that white background in there. Because, like you said, you have that gray issue that comes in, and I'm working. It's too much work. So, is it that big of a deal that I get rid of that and maybe try a black background?
Yeah, I would try black, and if that doesn't work, another option, and there's not enough time for me to include this all in a 45-minute workshop, but there is an option called a light table, which people who sell small pieces of jewelry and silver have used to some effect, and that provides light from below through a translucent piece of acrylic. It's like a milky acrylic, and there's a lamp underneath. It's hard plastic. It can do some interesting effects for products that I like, which is for jewelry. I don't know if you've ever seen a jewelry ad where you can see a slight reflection of the bracelet, like underneath the bracelet. Acrylic light tables can do that. So that may be a solution, but rather than spend money for that first, I would try the black and see if that works.
All right, now I have some crushed velvet. Would that work, or what I show you?
Is it black crushed velvet?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, it'll look fabulous.
All right,
It'll look fantastic. Are you kidding? Crushed black velvet? What could be classier? When you're done, you can make it into a little strapless cocktail dress. I watch Drag Race. I'm no fool. Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering if you had some tips for tricky surfaces like clear glass, mirrors, and stainless steel. I found that I have like a little picture of me staring back in my cookware if I photograph it.
You all remember the picture from 20 years ago? You remember the teapot picture? You don't want that. I assume you're fully clothed when you're taking your photos. Good.
Usually.
Okay. That's professional.
So.
Did you hear about the guy recently up in New Hampshire who went to one of those, is it Curves or one of those gyms where you can go where their whole byline and marketing is no judgment? So he went in, took all his clothes and started doing yoga. And when he got arrested, he said, I thought this place was no judgment. False advertising. Yeah, so the silver. Let's get back on topic. So for glass can be tough. This is where gray can come into play. Highly illuminated, but a slightly off-white background. It could be all it takes to get the glass to pop. With glass, though, there's an interesting little addition that you need to add as light, and it's a little tricky, and it doesn't cost anything. But light or jewelry like diamonds or gemstones, and in some cases even metal, but you have to control this, you need a tiny little spotlight, a tiny little hot white light that you can position on a little stand and change around if need be, even if it's holding it by hand. Just get someone to do this, unless you have a lot of items. And what you're looking for is to get the white light. You've got all the diffuse light that's coming in, right? That's great. But what you want is a little white light so you can put hot spots where they're important. Because if you look at the best glass photos, there's always those little sparkles, and that's how you get them without using Photoshop or software. Now, for mirrors, there's a really simple way to do this. If you take pictures of a lot of mirrors, you sell a lot of reflective flat surfaces. What you're going to need is a little stand like we use for backdrops, only it can be smaller. And you're going to hang a piece of black fabric or paper in front of it, off of it. You're going to position it in front of your camera on a tripod. And you're going to cut a tiny little hole in it that only the lens shows through. And you're going to use the camera timer on a tripod. You're going to compose the shot, and when you got it the way you look, you're going to click the timer and walk out of the frame. And now when you look at the picture of the mirror, all you're going to see is mostly black, and if you look really close, you may see the indication of a little lens, but it's going to be very tiny. It's definitely not going to be distracting. And we're not going to see you, as lovely as you are, but you're not for sale. The other thing you can do, and I've seen people try this, is you can take wax paper, if the mirror is small enough, and cut a piece to fit over the square or the shape, and then just fasten it down with tiny little pieces of tape that are almost invisible, because it just has to hold it for a second. And that wax paper still should look like a mirror surface, but it's like a smoky mirror, and you're not going to see anything reflected back. So those are two ways of doing that. Highly reflective metal surfaces. One of the nice things about that big box I showed you is it has a flap that comes down, and there's another flap, and you can just raise it enough to put your camera on a tripod through so that you're not visible on the shiny metal surface. But the box itself has lights that are very, very high intensity, little tiny bits of light, the LEDs. And so for that, what you need to do is to cut a piece of tracing paper, maybe several pieces, because you may need to add a few, and just fasten those on the top of the box to diffuse that light, and you'll take pictures of silver you wouldn't believe, like flatware, for example, or a silver set or a teapot. It'll look really nice. And again, you'll have just enough of the light coming through from those LEDs to give you little tiny spots where it really counts. And if you look at like an auction catalog that's selling silver, they do this. They have these, it's just, just enough of a little bit of a hot light on the edge to show that this is silver, but it's not so much that it's like blinding. Again, you're going to have to experiment, but these should give you some starting points. Yeah. Yes?
Well, she kind of asked the question, part of the question I was going to ask, because I had a Revere teapot, that was all, curved and reflective, and
Yeah.
you don't want to be in the picture, so I had to kind of rig something up. But
So you did? You rigged
I did rig something up. I just basically make it to where all they saw was the little iPhone
Oh, that's
part
great.
coming through, but it was hard.
Fantastic, yeah.
The thing that I had a question on, a lot of times I need to do a macro picture of a piece of jewelry,
Yeah.
and I have the little black flocked velvet thing, and that's like shows so much lint. I'm always like getting the thing to get the lint off, because you're in macro mode, you're picking up everything,
Yeah.
including every little piece of lint. Is there some type of material I should use for the black background instead of, that? But
Were you using velvet?
it's, how when you go to places and they have little squares that are flocked on one side with a black velvety type surface?
Yeah.
So,
But do you have a lint roller?
yes, but it's like I'll take like one picture, walk away, come back, and there's lint on it
Well,
again.
that's the
It's like-
downside, yeah.
It's like,
You're gonna hire someone to be your lint roller guy.
okay, Griff, are you available now that you're not doing the radio show anymore?
Unfortunately, I'm busy. I can't. But yeah, just keep I've run into this. I have a big roll of the paper that's flocked like black velvet.
Yeah, you said, is that the one you were talking at the beginning?
Yeah, and it too, it collects dust and lint. So I just have to go over it with a lint roller, and eventually it gets a little worn, and I have to cut that piece off and pull a new piece down. But I find I can control it with a lint roller.
Okay.
Maybe your lint roller isn't strong enough.
I have a white Chihuahua that's just, always around.
Oh, is it a long hair or short hair?
Chihuahua dust, short.
They don't shed?
They should.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's time to get a new dog. I'm a dog lover. I have 5 of them. Stop it. No more questions? Are you kidding? You have no more questions? Yes, okay, she's got a question. 'Cause we
So
still
I
have
did
time.
buy the light box that you recommended last year.
Yeah.
And I still find that it's grayish. It's not pure white, it's grayish.
Have you tried increasing the exposure on your camera?
My iPhone?
Yeah, your iPhone should have an exposure setting.
Okay, I'll ask you about that.
So you need to explore, because I don't recall where it is on the iPhone. I'm such an Android guy. But there's a setting. If there isn't one of the cool things that iPhones can do is there are tons of apps that you can download for free from the Apple Store that have settings like exposure control and
Okay.
white balance.
Okay.
Try downloading one of those apps and then increase your exposure a little bit, because I would have the same problem with my camera in that box if I sometimes didn't increase the exposure setting on the camera to make it a little bit brighter, and that
Okay.
usually whitens it up.
Okay, and then the tripod with an iPhone, they have
Yeah.
a attachment for the iPhone?
Yes, they
Okay.
do, and in fact, if you search on eBay for the following words: smartphone, tripod, mount, or adapter, either one of those
Okay.
words. There's a whole bunch of them for sale. They're very inexpensive. They mount on a tripod, and you can clip your iPhone right in them.
Okay, and then just now when you told us to get comfortable with our camera, I was playing around. It's been so annoying that every time I want to take a photo on my iPhone, it goes to the photo, which is not quite square. And I always have to swipe to the square, and then I forget. There's a setting, if you go to settings, where if you set it on square and then go to your settings, you can preserve it so it doesn't keep on toggling back. And that was
Oh.
just helpful for me to,
And you learn that by exploring.
yes.
Thank you for sharing. Let's give her a hand. Thank you. Now, she's taken this class seriously. She's actually done her homework right in the class.
I'm Lori from Lori's Store, and I'm the guy who raised my hand about the flash. I've been a professional photographer for about 30 years, so I use all of the things that you say, light box, external lights, and a flash. I have a D3 with a Nikon external flash on it.
Yeah.
And so I've had some stuff put up on Getty Images
Great.
from my eBay stuff. But I was wondering, what is the best overall? If you just had one thing you had to pick out of the three that you talked about, which would it be?
For you or for the crowd? Because you're a professional.
Both.
So that's hard to say. I probably would focus in on the lights. Because when people send me photographs of their studio setups, I'm usually most appalled by the lack or the misuse of lighting. Whether that's the improper temperatures, or the lights are insufficient, or they're using bright bulbs with no diffuser. That's probably the most important thing,
Thank you.
I think.
Yeah.
Boy, no one's ever asked that question before. You stumped the chump. And another question, this will be our, we have time. I mean, you want to ask a
You were
question?
talking about diffusers,
The what?
your light diffusers, like versus the,
Yeah, yeah.
the umbrella ones
Yeah.
versus the box.
Yes.
Which are the best?
I like the soft boxes. I'm not a fan of the umbrellas. The umbrellas, in most cases, bounce light against the fabric and then out.
Yeah, I
You're
noticed
losing some intensity. So I'm not a fan of those. There are umbrella setups that are used for strobe flash product photography, but that's an advanced feature that our friend who was just up here, who is a professional photographer, is probably very familiar with. But that's another thing to learn that's not really necessary. You can explore that on your own, and it's an added expense. But you may have seen studios where everything is dark, and then they take the picture, and there's a big flash, and the picture's perfect. But they're using studio flash, and it's not camera flash. It's a different animal altogether.
Okay.
But I recommend the soft boxes.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
they work really well. Again, if you need to see some of this equipment, you can go out onto the expo hall, and on the floor there, they've set up some really good examples of equipment and setups, and they're pretty good. So I recommend, if you don't do it today, tomorrow, stop by. I'll be there at various times in the day to ask talk about photography, answer questions, maybe ask you a few questions as well. Let's take some more. We have a few minutes.
My question is, with the soft boxes, the ones I just quickly looked up on eBay, all seem to be white on the inside. Are there ones that have?
No, they're usually metal. The inside of those soft boxes usually look like this. Let me see if I can get back there. You can see it in the soft box itself. Oh, look, remember all this? What memories? There you see, the middle photo? They're usually foil.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, not that. Then I mean the cube box.
This box, this
That
has
thing.
foil, except for the back, which is a piece of white paper.
Okay, can you get that with black paper? Or
Yeah.
could you just put a piece
So
in
these
there?
usually come with 3 different colored papers.
Oh, okay.
White,
Okay.
black, and red, or some other
Oh,
horrible
okay.
color.
So
yeah.
white or black? 'cause-
Or you can buy a piece of black art paper and just cut it to size. There's
Okay.
usually 2 little clips, and you just clip it onto the
Oh,
top.
okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
and it works like a charm.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. And you'll be our last question.
At the risk of a punch in the mouth,
I wouldn't do
do you
that.
have any recommendations for an application for an iPhone that would remove a watermark in a background of a photo?
I don't, and I would advise, if you're interested in that, is to explore it. I have, on request, removed watermarks using Photoshop. It's a laborious process, and depending on the complexity of the watermark, It can take, take an hour or so. But I've gotten very good at it, but I'm not soliciting work. So I would definitely search for an app that can do that, and I will definitely not question why you want to do it.
Thank you.
And with that, we're done. So thank you very much.